Perfect. So yesterday we saw from Greg Scott is going to come back on stage today. He did a great job introducing to us how the SDG 17 items are really being used by people around the world to monitor the world, how you can make an improvement. He talked about how New Zealand is doing, and today he's going to go into a little bit more detail about the work that his team is doing. So please welcome Greg Scott to the stage.
Morning. Back again. Yesterday, we talked about the goals themselves, this aspiration of the 17 SDGs. And what I'd like to do today is to dive from that global perspective down into the national and local a bit more. And I'm going to do it in two phases. So we're not going to talk about the goals so much. We're going to talk more about, okay, how do we make them work? So the focus now will be around some of our global frameworks that have been developed by countries over the last decade, and also how we're leveraging the Esri technology to do this. And then from then I'll step into what we term as the SDG Data Alliance. The SDG Data Alliance is what's really exciting me at the moment because it's really making a difference on the ground. Now, a heads up warning. I'm going to speed date you through the frameworks and the background on the technology because you know a lot of that, but I'd like to spend a bit more time in detail on that third part with the Data Alliance. Okay, so this is my world. This is my world in New York. We have this intergovernmental committee called Global Geospatial Information Management, UNGGIM. It's represented by all countries around the world, including obviously in New Zealand. And over the last decade or so, what we've been doing is aligning the global development frameworks, including the 2030 Agenda, the Climate Agenda, the Oceans Agenda, Urban Agenda, with our global geospatial framework. So we've developed all these geospatial frameworks over the last decade. And the umbrella framework is what we term as the UNIGIF, the United Nations Integrated Geospatial Information Framework. That's also now been adopted by every country. And when we were developing that framework, we worked with 133 countries in bringing that text together. It's really technical, it's really detailed, but it's all about what you do every day. And it starts at a very high level and gets into a lot of nuances. I'm going to touch on it just very, very briefly. So what is it? It's multidimensional. It has multiple parts to it. It starts at overarching strategy, and it finishes with country-level implementation plans. So it goes from global to local. And it's comprehensive in the way it's been put together. It starts with a strategy. And that strategy goes from vision and mission and goals and principles into what we term as our strategic pathways. We have 9 strategic pathways. These strategic pathways are also now well tested, and they've been developed under what we term as 3 areas of influence: around governance, around technology, and around people. So this for us is what we would term as the next iteration of an SDI. What it does, it brings all of the SDI capabilities and technologies and data and standards and all those elements together, but it also brings more in around the governance and institutional arrangements, around policy, around financing, and particularly around people and partnerships, because in developing countries, people and partnerships are incredibly important. And that pathway 9 in particular, communication engagement, is one of our greatest weaknesses. We don't communicate outwards very well. So that's the IGIF. There's an example of how the documents are presented to you. This is the latest versions from 2023. All of the resources are on our website under the IGIF. You can just Google IGIF. And the key element of this is that it provides the backbone for everything that I'm going to talk about going forward. So that's the speed on the IGIF. To data hubs. In 2016-17, we were really lucky to, I guess, get Jack's ear and talk about when hubs started, hubs and spokes, and system of systems, quite a few years ago. And the idea of could we take a hub and spoke approach to countries reporting into the SDGs. That was a research exercise we did for 3 or 4 years with only 6 countries, and that evolved now to where we are with what we term as the ArcGIS solution for the SDGs, which is now part of Esri's solution package. So what that is, in essence, has all of the tools and dashboards and information in there tailored specifically to those 17 SDGs, to those 169 targets, and to all of those indicators. So it's an out-of-the-box solution that you can, I shouldn't say the words plug and play, but it's not far off being able to do that. So what we've been doing is leveraging that. And one of the things about that is as we work with countries, we're introducing them not only to our IGIF, which they're very familiar with, but also now the technology. Because one of the challenges we've found over the last 5 to 8 years, when we talk particularly to developing countries, you know, what keeps you awake at night, what makes things difficult for you? And one of the first things about that is not so much the data. It's about, well, how do I make things work in my organization? How do I make things work across my agency, across ministries, across government? But then what the hell technology have I got to use? I don't actually have anything to use. And what I do have, I can't understand how to use, or I can't get access to training on it. So the idea of bringing this solution in, and this idea of a system of systems, just made sense. And so now that's the approach that we are using for the Data Alliance as I move forward. So just by way of context, we have a global framework which has country-level implementation, and we have a solution, a technology solution, to help support that implementation. Okay? So now moving to the Data Alliance. This is something that was just launched in 2021 at the High Level Political Forum. It is actually what we term as a true multi-stakeholder partnership. So it's not driven by the UN, it's not owned by the UN. The UN is one of many partners. And in that partnership, which includes philanthropic organizations, that's where the donor funds come from. So our seed funding actually came from W.K. Kellogg Foundation, from Public Foundation, and from Esri itself. And now we're growing that process. And Esri's contribution to this, to the countries, was software, free for the first 3 years, and then at 85% discount for the remaining years of the 2030 agenda, and professional services. So when you're in some of the least developed countries, that's a big deal. So that's part of what the Alliance is about. And as you can see, the effort there is to bring GIS technology, capabilities, and resources to countries to support the implementation of the SDGs. Why did we do this? This is really a no-brainer for everyone in this room, is that the challenge we've got with data, with technology around the world is not being able to be accessed, used, and realized. And one of the attempts that we were looking at was that if we're going to do it, if we're going to think about data and technology, let's do it in a way where we're not just copying from disk to disk or USB to USB or whatever that. Let's do it as a system approach and a shared approach, interoperable, integrated, and where we are basically keeping our data at source. So these were some of the principles around doing this. But at the same time, noting that public policy and investment was also going to be a key element of this process. two really important principles around the Data Alliance, which I've already mentioned. One, it uses a globally adopted framework. Two, it's using data hubs. Now, if countries choose to use some other approach in terms of the technology, they can do that too, not a problem. This is not a one-shoe-fits-all. It's really up to the countries how to do that. And one of the mantras around this is country-owned and country-led. And the big thing about this is, and I'll talk a little bit about this, it develops national capacity and capability, particularly in some of the least developed countries. So what are these countries? These are the countries that we're working on in the Data Alliance at the moment. There's 20 of them, 10 from Africa, 6 of the least developed countries in the world. That makes things hard. But at the same time, it means that if we can make this work, it makes it a lot easier in many other countries. The challenge we've got here is only 20 countries. It's not 50 or 100. And that's really the challenge we have and the ambition we have. So there's a lot of effort at the moment on growing and scaling the Data Alliance in the outgoing years. And there's a lot of investment work going on that in New York just at the moment. You'll see at the very bottom, I've got 2 countries, Ireland and Mexico. They're there as guiding countries because they were involved in some of our earlier work and have running existing SDG data hubs, one using an Esri technology, one not. So it's not about being biased in any way. So they are guiding countries for the work that we do. Today I'm just going to finish off with a bit of I guess an overview from Fiji and Tonga. And to anyone here from Fiji and Tonga, shout out to you both today, both countries today. You've been amazing over the last year or so. This is really how we look at bringing the pie together, so to speak. This is when we think about how do we implement a country-level action plan and how do we go from a strategy to the detail. This is really our approach. And I'm just putting this up here by background. And so what this simple slide is many, many documents. It's actually a 16-component guidance, page by page, pre-filled forms that are used by countries to develop an action plan. And I'll give an example of that action plan at the end. So there's a lot of rigor and a lot of structure in the background to the work that we're doing in the Data Alliance. By way of an example, just 6 weeks ago now, one of our LDCs, Burkina Faso, launched their data hub. And we did this online. This is that launch. So they have their story map, they have all their SDGs, they have their standard out-of-the-box SDG solution, and now they're starting to populate that with real information. I cannot overemphasize how amazing this has been for these folks. These people were invisible, and the National Geospatial Institute of Burkina were invisible a year ago. Now they have the ear of their president. That's the difference. And what they're doing is they're not putting a geospatial topo map together, they're delivering a whole of government solution. And that's something that's really critical in terms of visibility and particularly relevance and impact for a lot of these developing countries. Moving on to Fiji. So you just saw the Burkina launch. It's a long journey to get there. We guide the countries, we do workshops, we sit down with them, we go through all the different components. We have a team that does that. But what we do is guide. They do the doing. They're actually doing the actual work themselves. And this is an example from some of the Fiji workshops. And also some of the key elements about what do we need to do? What's important for us? And those 2 images are about we need to make sure that we're tied into Fiji's National Development Plan. Oh, but by the way, if we're developing hubs, when COVID came, we just took the Johns Hopkins model and we actually stood up. And when I say we, Fiji stood up their own dashboard. Why? Because they knew how to use the technology by that point. And so that became really critical for a lot of the countries in the work that we were doing as well. Okay, I know time's critical. In Tonga, exactly the same. We start with workshops, we work them through, they understand their national situation, they really do get their hands dirty and working out what needs to take place. Again, strategic drivers are absolutely fundamental if we're going to make this work across government. And then looking at where the data sources are coming from each of the goals, targets, indicators, who are the data custodians, who needs to be in these stakeholder workshops, etc., etc. And then at the end of it, we get an action plan. This is Tonga's action plan, and it's just there for some context. You can see vision, mission. It has 7 goals, but they've got 4 priority goals. And in that action plan, which is just over 100 pages, goes through each of those strategic pathways, actions, and elements, piece by piece by piece. And then it has a costing model and a funding model, has everything in there. That was actually launched last week by the Deputy Prime Minister of Tonga. Was supposed to be the Prime Minister of Tonga, but he happened to be at the General Assembly in New York, and he happened to be in a meeting I was in New York, so it was kind of bizarre. But you can see, so the Deputy Prime Minister, how do you say this? He had a prepared statement, but he ad-libbed most of that statement. So what was prepared, he said, oh, but by way of example, you know, we have a lot of issues with our crops and horticulture. We have bananas. We have really good bananas. Our bananas are not good enough for New Zealand. So how do we make our bananas better for New Zealand? Where are those bananas that we need to make sure in terms of the cropping, the horticulture, etc., so that it meets the standards for other countries, for example. So we had really good information and statements there, and it was really about this process providing Tonga with a truly national collaborative approach to improving the way they deal with their digital data and geospatial resources. And I have one last slide. And I mentioned yesterday 2 key points around the SDGs and around geospatial being so inclusive, transformative, integrated, interoperable, interlinked. And what we're seeing now, and I think this is something that's incumbent on many agencies around the world, is that as we've developed the Data Alliance, for us to achieve those first 2 points, we're seeing that agencies now need to collaborate more. They need to work more horizontal than they do vertical. And that's becoming almost a requirement to achieve anything across government, but also outside government and into industry sectors as well. And this really takes, as I say there, requires a shift in not only how we use and share and interoperate with data, but it requires a major shift in our human interoperability as well. How we reach out across different agencies that we're not used to working with. And that's been a significant change for many of the countries where they've become very siloed and very invisible to becoming much more open, much more known, and much more relevant within the government architecture. And this is something that I think is going to be really important as we think about going ahead with different industry sectors, particularly at local government levels, when we think about cities, etc. And in the context of some of the presentations we're going to hear in just a moment, is that requires us all to reach out and to, as we say in the UN, reach across the aisle. So with that, I'll stop, and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Hey, Greg, can I ask a question? So, the 17 SDG goals, like how do you think this group in here can really think about how can they adopt an individual goal? Like how does someone look at those goals and understand how they can have an impact in the work that they do?
That's a really good question. What I did not mention is that with the Data Alliance, originally with W.K. Kellogg Foundation, which is all about cereal and children and health, SDG 10 is their primary goal. The funny thing about the goals is that you turn around and say to deliver SDG 10, you actually need all the other goals. I would suggest that some of the key areas that are weakest at the moment, and we're having reporting at national levels, is that disaggregated level. So what's the influence and what's the impact in terms of sectors and cities? And as you just mentioned, when we talk about digital twins and reality, so what comes out of that can help us contribute into the SDG reporting or the SDG process.
Yeah.
I think it's that level. And I think what's not well understood at the moment is the role of cities in our future world.
I
And that's
agree.
not well captured.
No, that was great. Greg, thank you very much. And just to take a minute to recognize Greg and the work that his team does is really working with, emerging countries, really bringing geospatial to them, really taking a common approach to that is really going to have a major impact at a global level. But I think about the roles that each of you play at a local or a national level is going to continue to have a major impact on our world.